Hi there, we're back in the van again, and today I'm going to be meeting up with Victoria. Vick is an amazing American woman from Kansas City who gave up her fabulous career with video music in New York to come and settle down with an Italian man she'd met in America and to start a family. So we're going to go across to what she calls her mountain to meet her today. She has such a wonderful, bubbly personality. Let's get back on the road and I'll see you shortly. We're literally in the middle of the woods. We're surrounded by this beautiful woodland. So let's go meet Victoria. Hi Vic, so we're up on your mountain at last. Oh my goodness, what a fantastic view. Look at it.
This Mount Artemisia, this is the fine example of ancient text messages, because up on top of the ridge are strategically placed places with fire pits. So when people were coming in from Napoli, invaders or dignitaries, they would light the fires, and eventually the fires would find its way into Rome. And so the people in Rome would know the people were coming. So text messaging on our mountain.
Right. You've gone to a lot of trouble to learn about the place that you live in. What is it that you love most about this mountain?
This mountain is, I guess, an insulated space for me. And this is where I can go and I walk with my dog. I have a Malamute, and this is my favorite tree here. And it's really just my special place.
Yeah, and there's no one around.
There's nobody around. Once in a while you see people on bikes and horses and wild boar and the sheep guy and the goat guy. And
another thing I really wanted to ask you, I passed a load of camper vans parked on the side of the road, on the main road. So what's going on there?
Those aren't tourists.
To put it nicely.
Yes. Something surprising. Okay, so being that I'm American, we're not used to having, unless you're like in Las Vegas and special areas, we're not used to open prostitution. And here I found out it was actually the church, from what I understand, don't quote me, but from what I understood, many hundreds of years, the church sanctioned prostitution because they thought it was a way of men to burn off some steam. Well, here, instead of having it in the inner city, because, most Americans think, oh, prostitution's on the corners of some grungy inner city. No, they have country prostitutes where they are in camper vans. They're like mobile
businesses.
Yeah, mobile businesses, mobile motels, and, they have women in cars. And this breeds kind of a problem, because if you're a woman, like for instance, one time I was up on my corner waiting for a friend, and it's difficult to find our area. So I was on the corner to, flag down my friend so she could see where our street was. I cannot tell you how many cars of men stopped thinking that I was a woman, a country prostitute, selling my wares on my street corner. It was quite eye-opening, because it's not something that you would think kind of a low-class man would come to. It's any man. Any age group. And there's all different kinds of prostitutes. You have regular women, you have immigrants, you also have trans prostitutes. It's a buffet. Don't let me get vulgar.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story? What brought you to Italy?
Well, it's one of those stories. I met an Italian. I was living in New York City. So this is actually the polar opposite of where I came from. I was born in Kansas City in the Midwest, and then moved to New York City and lived there for 10 years. And I worked in the film and television industry, and also music. And I met my husband, your former husband, in 2002. And we dated long distance for about 2.5 years. And I came here in 2004. So next year I'll be here officially 20 years. Um, in my job, it was it was a heavy job, and I enjoyed it. I loved my career. It was like I was a workaholic with a smile on my face, and I loved every day of it. But when it came down to it, as a woman, you get into your 30s, and I really wanted a family. And so when I met my husband, 2.5 years, it wasn't like it was a snap decision. It wasn't. And then I decided to move here, knowing that I was basically committing career suicide because you just don't get back into that kind of job, or even to New York City. To get back into New York City, I think I'd have to win the lottery at this point. So I knew that it was career suicide, but at the time, in order to have a family, and live in Italy and all that, it felt like it was worth it at that moment.
And now, how do you find it now? What's your life like at the moment?
My life is the prime example of bittersweet. Because when you come to Italy in particular, well, any nation, if you choose to come to a nation, you can never quite know exactly the price of moving from your country. Now, let's be honest, I'm not coming from a country where I had to run away. I had a really great job. I had my family, friends. I had a supreme existence in New York City. I didn't come here as other immigrants, migrants, looking for a better future. I came here to have a family, knowing that I was, basically losing a lot, but in the interim of also gaining a lot. How do I feel now? I am split. I am 50% eternally grateful. But there's also that 50% of thinking, wow, I had to pay a lot for that gratitude. I have 2 spectacular children. I've had experiences beyond anything I could have imagined prior to my life here in Italy. Friends, you can't imagine the golden friends that I've attained. There's been a lot of pain. There's been a lot of struggle. There's been a lot of stripping of myself in order to fit in this world. I lost so much of myself personally, in my identity. And I think it was like being basically stripped down to your bones. Right now, I'm trying to regain myself because I'm currently in the middle of a very long, drawn out divorce. And that is very common here. There are very few quickie divorces. They pretty much don't exist. So buyer beware if you marry into this system, into this country. I was married in America, which saved me a little bit, but didn't save me much. The system here is very bureaucratic. It's very laden with delays and bureaucracy, and it's just drawn out too much, exaggerated, in fact. But where I'm at right now, I'm seeing the end of the tunnel, and there's a great big light, and I look forward to my future.
So do you think you'll stay in Italy, or would you go back home?
That's a very difficult question. I wish to go back home, but there is no perfect place on this earth. There is no magic paradise. There's always something. And I've lived here for 20 years. I've been out of my industry for 20 years. I've changed. My country has changed. The problem with moving out of your country, everybody in your life there is living that life. And they're creating memories that you aren't a part of. They're creating memories that are completely different to yours. So me going back there, I'm going to be a bit of a foreigner, but yet I don't fit in here either. It's a weird sort of, it's a limbo. Right now I feel like actually with this divorce dragging out, I feel like I'm in a purgatory because there's no freedom. And once that freedom happens, that's when to ask me that question. Because right now I don't have the freedom to even answer it.
To talk about
expectations
of women.
I think right now, in this moment right now in Italy's history, there's been so much progression, but there's a part of this society that I think women should know about. It's a basic buyer beware. Even though Italy has progressed in so many things, the treatment of women in this country is disparaging. And I think Italy is the #1 nation in Western Europe that has the highest feminicide and domestic abuse. I'm a victim of domestic abuse. My children were in a terrible environment during the pandemic. We were all locked in the house. And I remember when I had to do a police report after an episode of abuse, I came across a state trooper, state police officer. It's called the Carabinieri. And he was divided between his football game on the television and the dread of having to make my abuse report. My abuser was still in the same house. My children were living with that abuser that had done everything on the list that one can do: financial, mental, physical, even poisoning the animals. You can't even imagine the mental strain that we were under during that time. And I know in a few years looking back, I'm going to think, wow, our lives are really in danger. And going into have to tell your story, which is raw and it's emotional and you're stripped of all dignity and you have to voice. I'm living in a house with someone that I chose my life to be with, and this is happening to me and I need you to help. And you're looking at this man as like, oh crap, but my game. It's just demoralizing. There have been recently a young girl who is just dating a boy and he killed her because she broke up with him. And he was this type of man that you see over and over again in the society. And I don't want to make out like Italian men are bad. There are some fantastic Italian men, and they are fantastic fathers, and they are fantastic partners in life. I just didn't find one. I made maybe a wrong choice, but at the same time, that bittersweet pill, he gave me my beautiful children. So that's where I'm at in this story of mine. But I want people to realize that it's not all roses. People think, they see the movies, oh, Venice, it's so romantic. There's a dark side of this society here that they have to solve. And I don't know what the answer is, because I see how the mothers treat the boys versus how they treat the girls. And us mothers have to change. It starts with the women here, not putting up with the crap as mothers, not enabling these boys do what boys do. And I think as women, as mothers, we have to unify and really put our foot down, because this society can't continue this way. And girls and women are dying at even higher rates every year. They're not progressing, they're degressing. And it's a message I really, really hope that this society can solve. And sexually objected.
Yeah, exactly. And you see in Italian TV programs, one thing I remember really shocking, for a Catholic country, to see so many semi-nude women in the television programs.
Yes. Totally objectified.
Quizzes and things like
soap
that.
Soap commercials are near pornos. I mean, they're just like Playboy selling soap.
So you brought me to this amazing castle. What is it, medieval?
It has to be medieval, but there's also elements of, like, the flat Roman style bricks. Look at the flat bricks that go over, and then they have a tree growing in the middle. This when it was new, must have been some massive, important structure. What it is, I have no idea. There's no historical marker. I just happened upon this walking my dog.
As you do.
And this thing just sprang out of the forest, and just absolutely no information whatsoever. But
isn't it amazing? Look at that plant, the way it's sort of
wiggled
into the brickwork. I do know why the bricks were that small, why they were that flat, because they cooked quicker. Half the size, half the time cooking.
Well, that makes sense. That's how I feel about my meatballs.
We were chatting a minute ago about, the good things in Italy.
Oh, there's tons of good things. For instance, the lifestyle. Sometimes it can get a little bit daunting, because from New York, I was used to a certain pace, and even you commented on how fast I walk.
Oh, I can't keep up with you.
That's just part of the DNA that just doesn't go away. I'm still in that New York pace. So yeah, it can be daunting sometimes, the slow pace, but then there are other times you're so grateful. There are days when you just don't feel like doing anything, and not that procrastination is celebrated, but it's allotted to you. You can get away with being, oh, I'm just not in the mood today, because that's kind of like part of the culture, the laid backness. So the good things, there's a lot of good things. There's obviously the food. Everyone says, oh, the food. Yes, the food is great. There's also the cultural and the traditions. Here, it's still kind of wholesome, and in the family sort of aspect, everyone has their part. The grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, even though we don't have any of that. But it's beautiful in a sense. You see grandparents being fully a part of everyone's life. There's no, oh, that's that side of the family or this side of the family. Everybody just kind of comes together, and they still do the Sunday lunch, which is beautiful. The traditions are the same that they've been for hundreds of years, and even that is beautiful. You know, the children have such a part of the everyday lifestyle. They're not excluded. Like sometimes in other countries, maybe in America, you might have the kid table. That would be seen as almost offensive, because I've done Thanksgivings here, and I thought, oh, you know, the kid table, because that's my culture, because the kids don't want to sit with a bunch of adults. Whereas here, it's like, no, all the family, you can't separate the family. You can't have the kids like cornered in the back. You know, I thought maybe the kids would prefer it that way, but apparently not.
Talking of kids, you put your children through the Italian school system.
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
I made, for me, the right decision. And let me explain why. Being an expat, I was not that kind of expat where we came here with my expat husband and had an expat sort of job or a finite contract, or I didn't have a company that paid for these expensive schools. I can understand why expats go to private English schools, because maybe they're here for a little bit of time and they don't want to confuse the kids with the language or the culture, and I get that. And of course their companies are paying, so why not? For me, I knew that I married an Italian. I speak English in the home. My husband was speaking English with me in the home. So I didn't need to spend all that money to get the English, because my children were speaking English from the moment they were born. With the Italian schools, I find my children started with a Vatican school. So in a sense, I was Italian private, but it's still not the same as English international school. That was like very hardcore traditional, and it was good. It was really good. And they taught them, you know, certain ways, the old style, and maybe I'm still kind of very traditional in my mentality around. My daughter has dyslexia, verbal dyslexia, and unfortunately I couldn't continue her Italian private school, but my son did his first 5 years at elementary. We switched both of them when my son started middle school in a totally public school. Now let me tell you, I was a little bit snobbish. Not snobbish, oh, we must have this and that, name brands and whatnot, but with the school, the Italian private school, it was a beautiful little school. Everything was in place and painted. When I had to change my daughter to the public system, and the reason was because she had this dyslexia, she would not be able to receive any kind of public assistance or teacher assistance in the school. She would have no rights to it, because private is private. It's a la carte. Whereas public schools, she'd be in the right to have an assistant inside the class that would be able to be with her throughout her school day, which was extremely important. So when I first rocked up to this little public school, and it was a small school, and I had to just hold my breath and put that filter, which is a big filter, on this big mouth and really screw it in. The outside plaster had fallen. The graffiti on one side, it was lacking paint, or they patched the patch paint but not the permanent color paint. It looked like a Turkish prison. And then I started questioning, is it like even structurally safe? Because in an earthquake, which we get earthquakes here, could this little school survive? You know, all these like questions were going through my head. Well, I had to swallow all that. And we put her in that school. And I tell you, it was the best decision ever, because my son was in the middle school up top on the upper level of the school, and my daughter went to elementary school at the bottom. The best teachers, they were so wonderful, and they were so well prepared in the public system. And that's so opposite to the American mentality. If you pay, you get better. In this case, it's completely opposite. The public system is the better system, whereas the private system, unless your child is perfect and has no issues, you can do really well. My son, who has no issues like my daughter with the dyslexia, he had 5 amazing years, whereas she was not quite getting what she needed in the education. She wasn't getting that personal attention that someone with a little bit of difficulty would need.
At the private school?
At the private school. You had to pay, and you had to pay a lot on top of paying the private school. So in the public school system, I have fared very well. So both my children, Angelica did most of her 5 years in that little private school. Alessandra did middle school. My son just graduated from high school in June, and my daughter's in the 3rd year of high school. He went to a magnificent high school, top in all of Italy. I think it's like, what, number 3 or something?
3rd liceo scientifico in the whole of Italy.
Yes, and he went for scientific, and he did exceptionally well. Now he's going to university, the Roman University, and he's studying engineering and computer science, and he wants to do artificial intelligence and security and all this. And that system I'm really thankful for. And also, you're not being in that elitist sort of group of kids. You have kids from all walks of life. You have, kids, the families have some money, but you also have kids that are coming from somewhat limited working class background. And I think that's so important. I don't want my children to live in this bubble. And I find that some foreigners, and I don't want to seem like I'm not criticizing whatsoever. Everybody has their reasons. But I didn't want to be so isolated and insulated and bubbled off. My children are Italian, so they need to grow up in a real Italian culture with real Italian children. And I'm grateful because those Italian children aren't going back to their parents' home country. They're here for good.
Well, I'm really grateful that I met you, and we met through the Welcome Neighbour, where I'd been a part many years back. And then you took over and you gave a new lease of life to this lovely expat group. But I think you're in the best situation where you have a lot of Italian friends and a lot of expat friends. Mm-hmm. And thanks to the schools, you have the Italian friends. And because we're in an area up in the Castelli Romani that has so many expats, there's also this very intense group of expats that meet quite often. Mm-hmm. And you're in charge of this group called Welcome Neighbour, which I've mentioned before because I think it is a really great advantage for us in this area. So tell me how you got involved in that. How did you even find out about it?
In an internet cafe. I spent my first year and a half in Rome, and there was an expat group in Rome. I never found them. Lonely, if you can imagine, I came from New York City with a high-powered career, 20 million people, my country even. I could speak the language. Here, I came here not knowing a stitch of the language. And the intense crash into the wall of loneliness hit me so hard. I didn't think I was going to survive, very literally. Then we moved out to the Castelli in this beautiful suburbia. And I just happened to have my son, who was 8 months at the time, and we had moved into this house and we hadn't gotten internet yet. So I had to walk up to the town center. It seems so backward, not having internet in your home. But yes, I walked up to the center with my stroller, and I'm sitting there and we're making plans to go to America, and I'm looking up airline fees. And this lovely Swiss lady, Kathy, who I'm still friends with today, she's like, "Are you an American? Are you an English, are you an American?" And when I heard her English, I swear to you, the angels and the gods, all the gods, whatever God you believe in, the clouds opened, sunshine came down, and I thought, oh my God, there's another person here. I'd only found one Irish gal in the town that had a coffee bar, and I talked her ear off. She was so sick of me. And she's like, "Do you know about Welcome Neighbor?" So Kathy's like, do you know about this Welcome Neighbor? And of course I didn't know about Welcome Neighbor, because most people that found out about Welcome Neighbor went to the international schools. They had jobs in like European Space Agency, UN. So they were already in that circle of people. When I went to Welcome Neighbor, it was like a whole new world opened up for me. It was my lifeline. I went every month. I volunteered my house anytime Helen needed it. That was the previous president before me. And I don't know what I would have done without Welcome Neighbor. Just to hear my own language and give me time in order to build that bridge into the Italian community, because my children were very small, so I didn't have that common thread between me and the Italian community. And in all reality, they didn't need me. They're in their country. They're with their friends or with their community. So I needed that bridge to be built between the English world and the Italian world. And then I took over Welcome Neighbor, I think it was around 2010, about
13 years.
Yeah, 2010. And it was wonderful. I just, I've gotten kind of busy during this kind of difficult situation I'm in right now, but I'm ever so grateful for Welcome Neighbor. I love everybody in the group. And, it's kind of like having that English family away from home. I know that I can write on our group chat and say, I need this, or can anyone help me with that? And these women will come running, predominantly women. There are men sprinkled in, but it's kind of traditionally been a women's group, not officially, of course, but just traditionally. And there is so much knowledge and culture in this group. It's amazing. There's every age group. And we get together. There's no club fees. We get together because we want to be amongst each other. And I thank God every day for this group, because without them, I don't think I would have had a life here.
If you were to go back, would you make the same decision of coming to Italy? Or do you think you would have probably decided against it if you knew the difficulties and everything? Or are you glad anyway that you took the leap?
I've broached this question inside of my head. I would maybe take different steps. I would come here because I can't look in my children's faces and say I regret. That would be the worst thing in the wide world. When I look at my children, I know that this was my destiny to be here. My family is also Italian background. And there was something about Italy that was a destiny to it. And I think there's a cycle that needed to be completed by coming here. I know that my father passed away when I was little. And I know that he wanted to come here. And there's something about coming to Italy and having children here was like a reset for my family. And it was so important on so many unexplainable levels. So no, I wouldn't change coming here. I might change some things along the way, but I can't regret having these wonderful experiences, my children, meeting the people that I met. The people that I've met here are more than friends. They're family. Even people in the little village, I would not knowing them would be such, it would be such a detriment to my life. The people here and the experiences that I have experienced made me into the person I am today. And I don't know if I would be this person had I stayed in America.
That's exactly the way I feel. I mean, I gave up going to art college to come here. But to be honest, I think I've learned so much more just from being in a country like this. So I feel the same way as you. You are who you are because of what you've been through.
People are who they are here. It's the thing I admire most about the Italians. Nobody's going to ever make them totally civilized. There's always going to be that hair of wild in them. And I have to respect that, even if I don't agree with them. The fact that they are purely themselves. There is something so sincere about it, good or bad or ugly, whatever, however you see it. You can't change the Italian culture. They have been this way for thousands of years. And there's something very respectable about that. Their wild nature. Quirkiness, like they drive. Sometimes I get annoyed with their driving many of them are smoking and they're playing on their phone, they're talking on their phone. They park, whatever they need to do to get from their A to B. Sometimes you think, okay, we know that you took some sort of driver's license test, but did you remember what you studied before getting that driver's license? Like they get that driver's license and they just throw out whatever it took to get it. The driving can be...
I find that they love shortcuts in
Yes.
everything, like no queuing up.
Oof.
That's one thing they had to learn with the pandemic. You've got to queue up.
That
Distancing as well, they had to learn, because you could be in the middle of nowhere and yet people could still bump into your shoulder.
Yes. Yeah, the line is one of the things that I'm always trying to get over. And I think the biggest quirk is, you see women in the store and they might have a few things. Very seldom do the men offer to let the women go ahead. Whereas the men expect, oh, I have a few things. Woman, let me cut in line. I only have a few things. You have a mountain of stuff. I have a mountain of stuff because I have children and a family and I got to feed them. Obviously, I have this mountain of things in my cart. Yesterday, I was in a store and I turned and there was a man coming. He turned and I had to move aside to let him go ahead because I'm like, oh, right, I'm in Italy. Yes. So that's kind of annoying. But the driving and the Spandex Brotherhood, God bless them. The Spandex Brotherhood is my nickname term for all the bikers. And they crack me up because they are fashionable, even while exercising. So I have seen people in spandex that absolutely matches their bike. Like they can't just go out in a pair of sweatpants and a pair of shorts. No, they have to be in the proper sporting outfit for that sport. So that's another thing that I find kind of funny.
So you're not working here in Italy?
Oh, no.
No.
Not because I wouldn't want to. I would love to work. But coming here, my husband said, the reality, I left my career. My career is not here. And so I knew by coming here, it was definitely career suicide. And it seemed okay because that was the deal that we made. We wanted to have a family, and so someone had to take care of the family. And here, it's still seen as admirable to be a housewife, whereas in America, women kind of got slack, like, housewives just sit on their bums and eat bonbons all day. It is definitely not true.
Definitely.
Definitely not true. No, but as far as job prospects, that's one of the drawbacks to Italy. I don't see that they reinvest in their own economy, especially for the young people. Like I think about my son, and here he is.
Because I'm trying to not get the sun in my...
Okay. My son, he's going to college and his friends are going to college. But the reality of having a job for these kids when they come out, or even finding internships, the statistics aren't there. There isn't a lot of growth in Italy, while it was a beautiful experience to raise my children here. I fear that their future may not be here, and it makes me feel kind of guilty because you hear about people lamenting, oh, all the youth they're making, it's a mass exodus. Well, if you're not creating jobs for the youth, what are they supposed to do? Go and study hard, and the schools here are very hard. Not quite what people might expect. The schools on every level, especially the public schools, they're really, how would I say, they're really thorough with how they teach. Okay, they make it hard on the kids.
I don't think people realize that unless you pass your end of year exams, you're
Yes.
kept down the year. You
Oh,
don't
it's-
just get through and take final exams at the end of the amount of years you're supposed to do. You take your exams every year, and
Right.
if you don't get the grades, you
Yes.
repeat. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
And it is intense. It is so intense. And to go there, your family goes there and watches you take this test, and you have a panel of your teachers. It's like how you would approach maybe a doctorate or your thesis in America in university, not in high school. But they do that here in high school. So, I think with my children, they have dual citizenship. So by law, they have to live in America for 3 years if they want to pass down their citizenship to their children. That's a lot of wind. Yeah, in this area we get extreme. Oh wow, look at the leaves.
Look at it. It's amazing.
It's like snowing leaves.
Beautiful. It's autumn. It's definitely autumn.
Ah, yes.
Mind you, Christmas soon.
Exactly. No, but I think with my job, okay, so I'm foreign. I'm over 50. I've been out of the workforce for 20 years in my career. So being a foreigner, over 50, the chances of me getting a job, like an actual job, are almost slim to none. And that's the reality of it. You know, people, you might be able to teach here and there and here and there, but then here comes where the bureaucracy comes in. You have to have a certificate, and rightfully so. I'm not saying that one shouldn't be certified. So for me, when you ask me, will you go back to America, it's almost like I have to go back to America. Because, and then to start where? To go where? It's really daunting, this sort of future, but I want my children.
Kids a better prospect.
My children will have definitely, especially my son that wants to go into technology, because Italy is not known for its technology. Hell, we're lucky to have Wi-Fi in our house. So, you know, let's be honest, it's not known for its high technology. And my daughter wants to do multimedia, and I think she has better prospects there as well. And my viewpoint with them is like, you know, if you want to pass on the American citizenship, you're going to have to be there for 3 years. And that would be about right for when my son wants to get like a master's degree. So that'll work out nicely. But, you know, Italy will always be here. And it's just like America being there for me. I can always return back to America. It's my country. Whereas they can always return back to Italy. And I hope one day they do.